Hey, Ken.
Darryl, how are you?
Doing good. How are you?
Okay, I'm fine.
Good. Looks
Well,
like you got
it's
a Da
it's
Vinci in
you.
the back, or a Van Gogh, I mean, in the back there or something.
Oh, way in the back. Yeah, it's
Almost looks like a Van
it's a
Gogh.
friend. It's yeah. I gather from your background, you're a painter,
I,
so your
yeah.
eye obviously picked up on that immediately. But I'm trying to remember who even did that painting. We spent a semester up in Logan,
Mhm.
and there's a lot of good undergraduate artists in Logan,
Oh, yeah. Huh.
and we have some of them is just really quite. I'm no art connoisseur, but uh, uh, anyway, that's probably where that's from. I can't even remember now, but the painting you can't see there is a pen drawing is of when my son was. I was giving a talk in Montreal, and it was a street artist, and took a picture of my son and did a
Hmm.
pen drawing. But we have paint. Our next door neighbor is a painter, Melissa Paulson. I'm not sure what your where your taste or your style runs, but she's been painting quite a bit here in Utah, and she's our next door neighbor, and we have some of her paintings on our wall downstairs, and it's quite. There's a lot of good artists around, I'll say.
Oh, yeah,
So,
no doubt about it. Yeah. Yeah. I actually got to teach art at Taft Nicholson with, what's her name? Kim Martinez from the art department. So we spent
okay.
teaching art, which was pretty fun. So I teach art in our college too, like once a month when we don't have a pandemic. So
um, what does that mean?
we have a bunch of easels that we set up in our advising center, and there's room for 15 people, and it's a sellout every time. Every single time it's a sellout. It's pretty fun. People from other colleges come, and it's a mix of students, staff, and faculty, and it's a good time.
And what's the format? Well, I'm sorry, what's the format exactly?
It's oil, so yeah. So it's a real quick lesson. And it's pretty amazing what people do. What they accomplish in 2 hours. It's very cool. It's a lot of fun. It's a good change of pace from the normal things we
I'll
do.
say, yeah, yeah. Well, good for you. Uh, I'm a failed art major. That's how I started out as an undergraduate,
Mhm.
and I let's say I excelled at failing at art. I'll put it that way. Uh,
Anybody can be an artist, though. It turns out, I think it's not natural. For some people it's natural, but it can be learned.
yeah, in my case, it was I had aspirations of becoming like a photojournalist, and I still like taking photographs now, but you had to learn about every other medium
Mm.
where I was going to school, and I
Mhm.
realized I wasn't very good at any of the media that I was being exposed to. So, well, I know we're just a couple minutes past noon. I'm going to give people a few more minutes, and we'll see. Uh, Maybe about 12:05, if that's okay, Darryl. We'll just start around then. And
I'll check out. I assume I'll be able to take over the screen here. Yep. Okay.
okay, yeah, yeah. Well, since we're a few at the moment, maybe if people just want to quickly introduce themselves, I mean, I may have to suspend that if we just grow quickly, but maybe given our size, maybe we can. Uh, I'll just go through the names on my screen. Kathleen, do you want to just?
Hi, Darryl. Kathleen Zick, Family and Consumer Studies and College of Social and Behavioral Science.
Nice to meet you.
And Sakshi, if I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, maybe you could just.
That's right. Sakshi Azuri Anderson. Graduated from the Department of Economics with my doctorate a few years ago, and I'm an adjunct professor with the Department of Mining Engineering.
Oh yeah, we've met, right? I think somewhere.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's right. Nice to see you again, Dr. Butt.
Nice to see you.
And Lori, I know you just you put something in the chat, but hopefully your audio is working.
My audio is working fine. I don't know what's up with my camera, so sorry for my stock photo, but I'm Lori Kowalski-Jones. I just waved even though you can't see me. I'm professor and chair of family consumer studies in the college.
Nice to meet
I'm
you.
looking forward to your talk.
And Daniel, I think.
Hello, yes, this is Daniel. I also have my stock photo up. It's kind of grainy, I should upgrade it. And Darryl and I know each other in atmospheric sciences and also Nexus, pulmonary medicine, and city metropolitan planning.
Uh,
Hey, Daniel, thanks for joining.
And Sean, I know looks like you just joined us, but I thought maybe we're small enough in numbers we could just do quick introductions.
Absolutely. I'm Sean Steidinger, and I'm one of the clinical services librarians in the Eccles Health Sciences Library.
Oh, cool.
And let's see, my tiles are moving around as people join us, but Jackie, you are in the bullseye on my screen. Do you
Okay.
want to?
Sure. Hi, Dean Budd. I think we have chatted before on the phone. I'm Jackie Chen. I'm an assistant professor in the psychology department, and my research interests are implicit bias and diversity and mentoring. So I'm really looking forward to your talk.
Yeah, we talked, it was a couple of years ago, I think, but I remember talking to you. Good to see you.
And Austin, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
I'll do my best. I have some babies in the background. So I've got twin boys. They're 8 months old. But I work in Nexus as an administrative coordinator and also with the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences Dean's Office. So just kind of everything but the kitchen sink.
Nice, Austin. I hope your kids enjoy the talk.
Oh, they will.
We've tasked them to take minutes, so I'm sure they'll do a great job. So.
Coloring crowns, yeah.
Yeah.
That's great.
Okay, well, it's 12:05, and I know we're a smallish group today, but I'm really so I'm Ken Smith. I should introduce myself. So for those who don't know me, so I'm Ken Smith. I'm a faculty member in Family Consumer Studies, and I have the pleasure of being the director of Nexus. And through Nexus, some of you have joined, I think, on our other presentations in a series that we've called Dialogue on Disparities. And so these are roughly monthly presentations on something in that domain. And they've really been terrific. And I think today's talk will be yet another example of an engaging discussion on another new topic in this area. And so we've all introduced ourselves, but I'll just say that Dr. Budd, who is the Dean of the College of Mines and Earth Sciences, and came to us from prior here from Boise State, got his PhD at Penn State. And Darryl and I didn't really know each other really until just recently in a couple ways, but mostly in the context of the initiative within the university on the Fair and Equitable Society. And so that's, I thought it would be great that Dr. Butt could speak to us on this topic and his role in it. So Darryl, I'll just going to turn the time over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ken. And I'll just jump right into it, take over the screen here. I presume you can see my screen now. When Ken and I were talking, I thought what I'd do is try to give kind of an interesting and maybe a little bit entertaining presentation, lighter than my normal talks, which are rather technical. And along the way, kind of through metaphors and other methods, introduce you to some of my approaches to embedding diversity and inclusion into my teaching in particular. So the title is The Science of Art and Cultural Heritage, Embedding Concepts of Diversity and Inclusion into Academics. Before I start, let me just read our University of Utah land acknowledgement statement, which you can look up through this website. And let me get a laser pointer here. So Um, we acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional and ancestral home of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshute, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research and education, community outreach activities. So there'll be a couple themes today, underlying themes, and I won't explicitly point them out necessarily along the way, but one of them is the concept of transdisciplinarity, which is kind of core to the way I teach. And what I mean by transdisciplinarity is, it's not the same as multidisciplinarity. It's not the same as interdisciplinarity. It is different in the sense that we essentially ignore the disciplinary boundaries that kind of compartmentalize us. I'm someone who doesn't like the silos of academics at all, and I feel like it holds us back. And I'll show you one example along the way where a student who engaged in my course basically was set off on a trajectory that changed his life. And the topic of science and art is a really nice topic to pick because it is a great way to leverage the natural talents and the formal talents of people to solve problems. The other kind of underlying theme, or another underlying theme, is what I call unpredictable outcomes. And what I mean by that is having an open mind in the way you teach and in the way you learn, and not necessarily having a rigid path towards some sort of a goal. Most of us who have been teachers, we want to teach the students everything that's in our head, right? And the way I teach in some cases is really rather flexible and vulnerable and open to change. And I'll kind of explain that along the way. And then the other theme, as Ken alluded to, is I'd like to just introduce you a little bit to this new initiative, A Fair and Equitable Future, which is somewhat related to this presentation today. And we won't have time to do a lot of back and forth, but I would love to talk to you if you ever have an interest. And also there's a new website that just got launched, fairfuture.utah.edu, that you can access. It's pretty immature at this point, but it'll be getting populated here more and more in the coming months. And we'd love to feature stories about you on it if you're interested in connecting with us. So the grand challenge that Dan Reed has started to launch, which is a 1U grand challenge, and essentially it is it's pretty broad, and it is founded on these sort of pillars in the areas of health, education, justice, environment, and prosperity. And my job initially, I'm just getting this started for Dan, is to try to communicate with as many people as I can at the university, gather information and inventory what we do and who our campus leaders are, and try to come up with some ideas for, at least in the beginning, theme semesters, ideas for interdisciplinary teaching, which is what I'm going to talk about a little bit today, possible ideas for seed funding, and maybe even cluster hires. So I've actually given this lecture before, and one of the first times I gave it was in India, and I was invited by a friend of mine who wanted me to come and talk about the importance of diversity in education. I thought that I was just going to be giving a simple PowerPoint presentation in an auditorium to a bunch of faculty, but it turned out that when I got there, they took me out and put me on stage, and I was in this gigantic tent. What you're looking at is actually a huge tent. And I'm actually taking a picture of the person who talked after me. And you can see that there's a ton of people out here. I wish I had used a wide angle lens, there were actually 5,000 teachers in the audience for this presentation. And you can see also there's a camera right here, and they didn't tell us that they were live streaming the event to 20 million teachers in India. And we also were teaching between these giant statues. This is the goddess of education. And then on the far side, you can't see, there's a giant statue of Gandhi on the other side. So we basically walked out on this plank, like walking out over a plank on a boat, and lectured on this podium, which was a little bit challenging because I thought I was going to give a PowerPoint presentation. What you'll notice down here in the corner actually is a newspaper, and you might recognize just from the shape and the color that this is a photograph of the Dalai Lama. And I was not aware that just before I was going to speak, the Dalai Lama talked, and it was a little bit intimidating to follow him, to put it mildly. He's quite a character. If you haven't met the guy, he's a stand-up comedian, and he gave this really profound lecture on justice and diversity. And one of the things that he said was, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, I think it's pretty accurate. And keep in mind, he's a religious leader and a political leader. He said that politics and religion will never solve our problems, only education will. And so education has a big role in solving the problems of the world. So this is the beginning of my presentation. The first time I taught this class, I put this picture up on the screen, and I said to my students, butterflies see the color purple really well. And then I kind of allowed a moment of silence and awkward silence. And then I kind of continued by explaining to them that butterflies see the world differently than we do. Their world, their color spectrum is different than ours. They see color from somewhere in the wavelength of yellow, in other words, around 580 nanometers, well into the ultraviolet range, down around 100 nanometers. And you can do an experiment. In fact, if you catch a white butterfly, and do this very carefully, and you carry the white butterfly into a closet and shut the door and shine an ultraviolet light on it, what will happen is it will reveal that the butterfly is not in fact a boring, dull white butterfly, but has actually got an exotic and interesting pattern on it. So what to us looks like a boring white butterfly, to another butterfly looks quite interesting and exotic. The color purple actually unexpectedly turned out to be a theme in one of my courses. I started off teaching a course on just color in general, but I realized that there's so much material when it comes to the color purple that we ended up continuing to talk about this particular topic for an entire semester. And, you know, as you're probably aware, you know, purple has been associated with wisdom, dignity, mystery, magic. It is known to be the color of royalty. During the period of Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, for example, there was what was called the sumptuary law that was established that regulated that lower class people could not make extravagant displays of wealth, and that included wearing purple. And supposedly there were periods of time where you could actually be put to death for wearing purple. It's also an interesting color, just when you look at the color spectrum. It is unlike, for example, orange, which sits between yellow and red. If you mix yellow and red, it makes orange. And unlike green, which sits between blue and yellow, if you mix blue and yellow, it makes green. Purple sits at the end of the color spectrum, not between blue and red, which is kind of an interesting thing. Purple also is in some cultures is considered the color of birth, and in some cultures it's considered the color of death. The one way to look at that is it is the end of the known and the beginning of the unknown. So kind of a fascinating topic, and believe it or not, you can spend an entire semester talking about it. So when you shine light on something, much like the way a butterfly sees the world different than us, you can gather different information. And so, for example, a butterfly might see a flower like what I'm showing on the right, whereas we might see a flower as I'm showing on the left. And I'm a material scientist by training, and that's what I do. I shine light on things in order to understand them. And I mean that both literally and figuratively. My favorite fundamental entities or particles or waves are the electron and the photon. And this is true of most material scientists. So we strike a material with photons or electrons, and then we look at what comes back to us, ions or other electrons or other forms of energy. And we have detectors, and we can study materials that way. My favorite way of shining light on things is what's called a synchrotron. And I currently have a large grant which employs about 50 people at 5 universities in a national laboratory. And we use synchrotron radiation to look at materials with fluids inside of them. And the way a synchrotron works basically is you have a beam of electrons that you produce with an energy source, and then you bend that beam. In other words, we create this beam of electrons, and then the beam gets bent and goes around and around in a circle. And as an electron beam gets bent by a magnet, it loses energy, and that energy loss is manifest in the formation of an X-ray, and we call these bright X-rays. So essentially, what a synchrotron is a giant building with electrons going around in circles, producing these really valuable X-rays that we can use to analyze materials. So let me change gears just a little bit and talk about transdisciplinarity. One of my favorite topics is Leonardo da Vinci, and I find him just a fascinating person in history. He was born in 1452, and you probably recognize this image. It's very famous. I remember this image being in either my chemistry or physics book when I was in high school. And you know, he is someone who was never inhibited by the boundaries of academics. That's probably partly because he never went to a university. Leonardo da Vinci was not allowed to attend universities, and that's because he was the son of a slave. He was an illegitimate child. His mother was very likely a 15-year-old girl, probably from somewhere around Afghanistan. And so I kind of attribute his freewheeling nature in some sense to the fact that he didn't attend a university. He was an artist. He was an inventor, a botanist. He was a pathologist, which he probably shouldn't have been. He was a material scientist, a military engineer, and a military architect. It's believed he was a military spy for a while. He was one of the original mountaineers. He used to climb mountains in order to study the atmosphere so that he could paint better. He was a set designer, an event planner, a writer, a musician. He did incredible things. And on the other end of the spectrum, he was a really interesting and probably a very annoying person to work for or work with. He was a perfectionist, a procrastinator. He started jobs that he didn't finish. He was compulsive. He didn't follow, instructions from people that were paying him. He was also known as a colorful dresser, and it was written in a number of cases that he was a very handsome individual. He was left-handed. He used to write in reverse. My son actually wrote in reverse for approximately a year, and my wife and I were really concerned about it. But I kept telling myself that he must be a genius. He also had a great sense of humor. I like to refer to Leonardo as being both a prankster and a master of yogiisms. And this is one of my favorite quotes. People of genius sometimes accomplish the most when they work the least. So this is what that image looks like now. It's deteriorated enormously because of the way it's been stored over the years. And researchers are trying to understand, what's going on. It's also been dated, by the way, to the year 1490 something. I'm going to just use 1495 as the date. You remember in my previous slide, I mentioned that he was born in 1451, and that date is pretty well established. So if you do the math, which is pretty simple, that would indicate that Leonardo da Vinci drew this image of himself when he was somewhere around 38 to 45 years old. I don't know about you, but this does not look like the face of a handsome 40 some year old. So this is very likely not an image of Leonardo da Vinci, but it is our image of a Renaissance man. It is our image of a genius. When we think about a genius, we think about Einstein and we think about da Vinci. We're biased, in other words, in the way we think about what a smart person looks like. So bias is something that I try to help my students overcome in their classes. And many of you, I'm sure, have seen this illustration. If you've ever taken a course from the group Project Implicit out of Harvard and UVA, they use this a lot. It's also one of the first pages, maybe even the first page in the book Blind Spot. So if you want to do this little illustration for yourself, if you don't believe that what I'm going to do is actually, what I'm going to show you here is actually real, feel free to try it yourself. Usually I do this on an overhead projector because the projecting it this way, there's an aspect ratio problem, but hopefully this works for each of you where you're at. So you can obviously see a table on the left that is sort of narrow and really long, and then on the right is this table that's a little bit wider and shorter. But if you take the table on the right and rotate it and superimpose it on the table on the left, you see that those surfaces are actually exactly the same. Now, no matter how long you sit and stare at the figure on the right, and I've tried it, and I cannot convince myself that, in fact, that these surfaces are the same. And that's because the human mind takes a two-dimensional object when it's displayed like this and turns it into a three-dimensional object and then applies dimensions to it. And so this is just an example of how important it is to make measurements and to not just simply believe your own intuition, let's call it. Kind of a fun experiment. So in my class, the way I kind of help students understand bias and diversity is that I use this statement, which I paraphrase from Atkins' PChem text, and it is proof of something, proof of a mechanism, proof of a scientific concept or a hypothesis, proof of provenience or provenance is less like a mathematical proof than it is like a proof in a court of law. In other words, in order to prove something in science or history, different is.
Hey, Darryl, I'm just going to jump in. I don't know if other people are, sorry to interrupt, but you were turning to a robot voice there, and I don't know if it's if everybody's hearing it, but that's the way I'm hearing it.
Moment,
I'm hearing it as well, Ken.
Oh, I think Darryl, yeah, it looks like Darryl's just going to step off and then come right back on. I assume that's what he was proposing. So I think, oh, there he's coming back on. Okay.
That was interesting.
Try it again. Darryl, it sounds, sorry, Darryl, it sounds the same.
Stop you for just a second.
Okay.
There on screen, and my name had actually changed to can you hear me okay now?
Still, I think it's still similar. Is it, I assume this is a universal thing. Everybody is.
Yeah, it's his voice is robotic for me.
Okay.
He said he's going to log back in.
Okay. All right. We'll let him. I couldn't quite hear that, what he was saying, but, oh, there he goes, okay. Okay, let's all pray to the God of education that he was showing us earlier, and let's
Back in.
okay, we said again, it sounds like it might still be the same problem, Darryl. I don't know. Let's give it a go.
I'm getting a message. My internet is unstable.
You sounded a little better there.
Try like I'm frozen. So I'm appearing twice on the once.
Hey, Austin, does Darryl have a phone number he could also try calling in, and but still could you know, control
Yep.
the slides?
So
Can you?
here, I'll email it to him.
Okay, so Darryl, I hope you can hear us. So maybe we'll try having you be transdisciplinary. Be on the phone for your voice and on Zoom for the slides. And see if that might work. Thanks everybody for hanging in there.
Ken, it looks like he's also having problems sharing his screen now.
I just listed two possible options that I've done in the past. Either if he's got a good cell phone connection and it's a 5G, he can just probably use his phone as a hotspot and connect his laptop to it. And the other one is, as he just said, Ken, he could probably just send the slides to, I don't know, Austin or you or I, and then we can just advance it and he can call in.
Yeah. Okay, let's see.
I went ahead and emailed him the phone number. And then if he, I mean, the app works pretty good too. The Zoom app works pretty good.
Slide. What I was saying is that in the course that I teach, the underlying foundational principle is this statement, and that is that proof of something, proof of a scientific concept or a mechanism or hypothesis or theory or provenience is less like a mathematical proof than it is like a proof in a court of law. And so this is the structure of the course that I teach. And it actually is a course that's taught with various themes over several semesters, and the requirement is you take it for at least 2 semesters, and most of the students actually would take it for at least 3 semesters. And the idea is that you find a problem that is super interesting and super fun, and you bring students in from multiple disciplines to work on it from various directions. And so there's a classroom component, but it's a flipped classroom. And I also have what I call a dynamic syllabus. In other words, we don't necessarily follow a specific path that I plan. I give the students the ability to change the course of what we talk about and what we teach and learn during the semester. The students also have full access to my research group, which has been typically around 20 students and postdocs. And then I have colleagues at different institutions. And last semester I taught it, I had a colleague at the Walters Museum in Baltimore, the Smithsonian in DC, and the Historical Society in Boise, Idaho. And then we also involve faculty or staff from other places at the university, particularly people from the library, art history, art, and English. And the idea is all of this together, by bringing these groups together, we basically develop synergy and you know, some diversity of ideas, and hopefully make 2 + 2 = something greater than 4, so to speak. So one of the themes in the class was to try to reverse engineer a piece of art. So for example, when I say reverse engineer, I don't mean it in an engineering sense, I mean it in a very general sense. So if I give you a painting, for example, I want you to tell me about it. And so the process of reverse engineering might mean, you know, discovery through the analysis of its structure, what was its function or purpose, its meaning, its operation, where did it come from? And obviously these words mean different people to different, you know, depending on your discipline. And so the word structure to an artist means something very different than the word structure to a material scientist or to a mechanical engineer or to you know, a nurse, for example. So here's an example of a painting. And so if I were to give you this painting and ask you specifically, you know, is this authentic? Is it an original? Is it painted by, you know, an artist from the Hudson River School or a European artist? When do you think it was painted? How was it painted? What do you think the pigments are? Is it stolen? Do we need to repatriate it? There's all kinds of questions we could ask. So you can imagine, you know, the complexity. I mean, there's tremendous complexity in a painting. I'm sure the one thing you'll all agree, though, is it is, you know, likely a masterpiece. Probably looks like it's probably painted in the 1800s. And of course, I'm making that up completely because this is a painting that I painted, and it actually, not only did I paint it, but I also made all the materials to paint this. And so I know everything about this painting for the most part. I made the canvas. It's basically a Belgian linen glued onto birchwood. I know the chemistry of every single pigment. I know the binder. I made the binder myself. I mixed it together. I can tell you exactly how many layers I used in each area of the canvas. And it's a complex thing. Paintings are multi-layer polymer ceramic composites, and they're complicated. So when you try to analyze a painting, it's non-trivial. So again, if I ask a group of students to reverse engineer this, it poses a very challenging and interesting problem. And if you bring diverse groups together to answer the questions that you want to answer, you will get unexpected answers. So one of the projects that we worked on was related to mummy portraits. And these were, there's about 1,000 of these that exist in the world. They're quite rare and quite valuable, as you might imagine. And during the period where the Romans began to occupy what is now the area of Egypt, the Ptolemaic Empire, around 200 AD, the culture of the Egyptians began to change. And one of the things that they did, and they tried to, I should back up, they tried to keep their own culture while also adopting the culture of the Romans. And so one of the things that is quite interesting is they started to paint portraits of themselves that look more realistic, very much in the style of the Greeks and the Romans, and started to kind of give up this ancient Egyptian style. And it's really quite fascinating because what you find is that there were these really interesting examples of mummy portraits actually kind of glued to sarcophagus. It's sort of an interesting fusion of what I'll call Egyptian religious rites, Roman artistic style, and Greek cultural traditions. This is a beautiful example. This one happens to be at the British Museum. And then this is another example, which is absolutely incredible to think that this was painted using encaustic, that's beeswax and pigments, about 2,000 years ago in ancient Egypt. It's a magnificent masterpiece. It's incredibly valuable. And this one is at the Getty Museum. So there's a program called Appear to try to understand the nature of these portraits, to try to find connections between them. and to try to understand the meaning. So I was given a very tiny particle, it turns out, from this guy. This is my mummy on the left, and pretty interesting guy. Obviously didn't own a set of tweezers, as you can tell by the really impressive unibrow. The Walters Museum was analyzing this portrait non-destructively, and one of the things they discovered that was a big surprise is that in this one region on the collar, and it's hard to see in this image, but it's a purple clavi, and clavi is an equestrian strip that would be worn by an Egyptian to indicate that they were equestrians. And they noticed the presence of aluminum and chrome, which was quite fascinating. So my colleague at the Walters Museum asked me if I would be willing to analyze a particle, and he was able to get permission from a board of directors to give me this particle. As you can imagine, taking a sample is non-trivial. And he sent me this little tiny particle, which you can see this little dimension bar at the bottom is 50 microns across. So this became a vertically integrated project for my class. And just to give you an appreciation for the size of the particle, this is an electron microscope image of the particle superimposed at the same magnification onto the hair of one of my students. And it takes a lot of talent to tie a hair like this and take a picture of it. And but you can see that the particle itself was on the order of the size of the diameter of a human hair. And we have technology today that allows us to actually machine particles at this dimension. In fact, I could put the entire Encyclopedia Britannica onto this human hair through techniques of machining. It would take a long time. This is also over here another sample that we machined out, except that I had to multiply the size by a factor of 10 in order for you to be able to see it. So this gives you an idea of what we can do now today. And this is why Glenn Gates sent me the sample, because we now have the ability to machine tiny little particles and analyze them in great detail. This is a picture of one of my students, Janet Burns, working on the instrument that does this kind of work, and she went in and machined out a bunch of samples. And I'm going to go quickly here because I know we're running out of time. But she machined out a whole bunch of samples for us, and then we analyzed them in great detail. I'm going to make a long story short here. Through a lot of thought and research, my students in my class were able to determine that the pigment was actually synthesized. The Egyptians actually made this purple pigment by a synthetic route, and we weren't sure. We knew it was organic. It's called a lake pigment. We didn't know at first, what the origin of the organic dye was that allowed us to make this pigment. But my students set out to try to reproduce what the Egyptians did. One of my students, I have to say, actually discovered a recipe in the volumes of Pliny the Elder, which is a 2,000-year-old textbook, that indicated that if you mixed certain kinds of lichen with your own urine and then fermented it, it would make a vivid purple. And I didn't allow him to do this work at the university, but he did it at home. And one day he brought in this incredibly vivid purple pigment that he had made from lichen in his own urine, as it turns out. So pretty entertaining. The students did all kinds of experiments. They gathered plants. They found people in different locations that went out and harvested things in their yard and sent it to them. And then they made a variety of dyes, and then they added salts to the dyes, iron or chrome. And it turns out that if you have a red pigment, for example, a madder pigment or a cochineal, which is an insect, and you add a salt, you can actually shift the color into the purple spectrum. And then they added alum to the dyes and made the dye adhere to this particle and ultimately made pigments. The students also found literature that indicated that the Egyptians actually made red and blue dye. And this is an image from a publication of 1908 from a British archaeologist. And he discovered a dye not far from the location of some of these, where these portraits were found, where they made red and blue dyes. And in fact, what was interesting is that the dyes were made in lead vats. And when we analyzed our samples, we discovered that not only did we have these interesting organic pigments, but there also were little particles of lead sulfate and lead carbonate, which we presume were residue from the dyes themselves. To make, kind of bring the whole story together, one of my students decided to paint his own portrait, and we didn't realize the entire semester that he actually looked very much like the mummy that we were studying. So he painted a self-portrait, which was kind of fun, using ancient Egyptian techniques. And this is an image of him over here. His name is Elijah Lorino, and he was a first-generation student, came to my class being somewhat naive about science. He was an art major. And in the course of the experience he had, he became very interested in science, started taking chemistry, and he ended up, when he graduated, he went to the Buffalo Bills Center of the West, and had a few other experiences after that. Now he is at the Winterthur Museum in Delaware, and working on his PhD through the University of Delaware in conservation science. And if you don't know about the Winterthur, Delaware program, it's considered perhaps the best program, certainly in the United States, one of the best programs in the world. And he is without a doubt a Renaissance guy, I'll say. So what we're doing now is actually trying to correlate this mummy portrait of that is at the Walters Museum with another one in Houston, which kind of looks like maybe this is his sister. Who knows? She does have the unibrow thing going, but apparently owns a pair of tweezers. And this blouse that she has has the same chemistry as the clavi of our friend on the left. So I did rush through that little bit there. What I wanted to do is end with a discussion on what we might be able to do at the university to kind of have a greater impact in a fair and equitable society. And this is just a little play on science and art here. Let me read this little quote at the bottom. A society without a grounding in ethics, self-reflection, empathy, and beauty is one that has lost its way. And that's a quote from Brian Rosenberg, who is a president at Macalester College. And I think one of the things that we have lost over the years and is, the kind of the horizontal parts of education. When I went to school at Penn State, I was able to register and sign up for a semester of education, and I could take as many classes as I want. I could take classes in art and history and humanities and English. I ended up graduating with a minor in English, and today it's much harder to do because of the cost of education and the rigidity. And I think we've really lost that, and we've lost these higher order skills. I think as a consequence. This kind of feeds into things we can do together towards this initiative. And the questions I've been trying to ask are, what are we doing already? What are our strengths? How are we different? Who are our campus leaders? Who are our community leaders? What changes could we make at the university to increase our impact? So this is culture and structural changes. And then what are our grand challenges? And in the process of inventorying what we do at the university, it's unbelievable. It's incredible. And I've talked to some of you already, and this is a list, and I know you can't read it very well. I think I might have sent it. I've sent a partial version of this to Ken at some point, and I'd be happy to send it to folks. But this is a list of things, from little things that we do, like the Urban Rangers program that helps homeless, to neighborhood partners and Nexus, and what we do in the Huntsman Cancer Center, in the Moran Center. It's really quite incredible. It's not coordinated, It's not all transparent. A lot of the things happen without a lot of publicity, and that's appropriate, quite frankly, in some cases. We don't want to look like colonial activists in a sense that we're bragging about all the things we do. And so it's a really humble, these are really humble pursuits in some cases. And so what I've tried to do is come up with some sort of a bigger picture or a higher level picture of what we could do together. And I've started to kind of converge on this strategy. And this is, keep in mind, I'm an academic. I've been talking to academics and trying to communicate with academics. And this might not be the best way to communicate with the public or the broader community at the university, but these are the areas where I see strength: big data inequality. And Nexus is very involved in this. Environmental anti-racism and resource deserts, which covers a lot. It includes legal deserts, it includes food, water, clean air, et cetera. And then health equality, which covers a lot. And these are all overlapping, of course. And then I have these foundational priorities that I've started to converge on with input from many people. And the seventh one is the one that I talked about today, and that is to make education fun, profound, and impactful. And so I'm going to be trying to think about, what are the clusters of excellence that we want to kind of promote and support at the university? And can we articulate some grand challenges, not just for the university, but for the state of Utah? And I'm going to stop there. And I'm really bummed that we had that interruption, but hopefully my message came through in a way. And happy to take questions or maybe get feedback on this initiative. So I will stop there. Do you want me to stop sharing? It's probably.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Darryl. Thank you. That was absolutely terrific. And I think so many of us are, if my reaction is typical, just the blending of your insights into art and bringing the science into it in a really novel way. I thought that was just absolutely terrific. It's one of those things where, like, I wish I had thought of that kind of reaction. So so maybe I'll just let if we have some questions from people about comments that Darryl has provided. I did have one at the end. So Kathleen's waving her hand. Maybe I'll throw the mic to her.
Sure. So the list of organizations on campus that are doing important work in this area is truly impressive. But one of the things I'm struck by is, having been on faculty here for almost 40 years, how little I know about what is going on in many of those domains, and how have you been thinking about how to capitalize on sort of the economies of scale and scope that could potentially exist if we were better communicating with one another?
Yeah, that is the sort of the $10,000 question. We do have a new website that we put together, and I think I showed that at the beginning. It's Fair Futures, at utah.edu. And one of the things we want to do is highlight the people on campus that are doing great things, and that'll be a way to connect people. I don't know exactly what Dan wants to do. When I started off on this, the instructions I had were, don't hold town halls, and don't do surveys, but just pull this together and give me some ideas so we can get it going. That's where I'm at right now. I have interviewed, by the way, around 100 people on campus so far, and I've spent about an hour with each of those individuals, in some cases as many as 4 hours. So what I've done is I've tried to meet people, talk about what they do, learn about them personally, do a deep dive, and then get their feedback on these ideas. And it's been incredible. But everybody needs to have that kind of perspective in order to, match people up. And my proposal to Dan, and I'd be interested in your feedback on this, is that we perhaps hold some summits in the future where we bring people together to share what we're doing across campus. And people get sick of meetings and strategic planning and things like that. So I see it as being an event that is really fun, that people want to go to, where we meet one another and try to build bridges across campus. And one of the statements that I heard a lot was, and it's going to be in my memo, I think, is I tried to work with that person, but that comes up a lot. And I also heard, yeah, they should be doing this. And those are comments that were made kind of frequently. So I think we gotta really deliberately work at breaking down the barrier. I don't have the answers to exactly how you do it. You're not going to bring everybody into this. There's no question. It's going to be the choir that tries to work together. But from my perspective, what is fun about this is the collaboration. I love collaborating with people, and we have to incentivize it. We have to reward it. And community engagement, this is about community engagement, as I think you've probably figured out. It's not about doing ivory tower stuff. It's not about publishing papers. It's about community engagement. And from my perspective, it's also about producing students who go out and change the world. Flipping the pyramid of economics when it comes to healthcare, flipping the economics of your business so that it's not just about making a profit, it's about helping the community. Those are the things that I think could make us different. So that's a pretty weak answer to your question, but that's what makes this kind of fun, I think. So.
Hey, Darryl, we have another question. Gay, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Thanks, Ken. And I got a little preview of this from Darryl yesterday, so even though I missed the beginning, I feel like I'm somewhat up to speed. Darryl, there's got to be other universities that we can model after. I know, even US News ranks colleges with learning communities, which is really kind of another word for community outreach. And then you have organizations like Arizona that have, a really robust, they call it broader impacts, which I prefer because I think it's more aligned with what we do. But community outreach seems, I don't know, I go back and forth on the terminology. I like broader impacts better. But Arizona has a huge broader impacts office that would address some of the things that Kathleen was mentioning, like they monitor, they evaluate, and they provide support and some level of funding. But there's a central. I know the university doesn't always love things to be centralized. We're very strong in our individual colleges, but the Arizona models, I just hear wonderful things about from the research faculty that really rely on it. So it's not just how we message to the community and develop our students, but it's a huge resource to faculty that are really committed to their intellectual pursuits and would love to do the community piece, but just don't have the time to. But they have this resource that they can go to. I mean, I guess I'm suggesting let's look at some of these top 25 universities that are ranked by US News for doing this and see how they do it. Maybe you've already done that.
Yeah, I've done a lot of that. And, I worked for a president once who always said, being innovative sometimes means copying other people. So
sure. I mean, there's no reason to recreate the wheel.
No. So this is not an original idea. There are lots of universities already doing that. And that's why we want to be able to carve out unique spaces for ourselves, right? And the Arizona model I'm somewhat familiar with. And I have been proposing an Office of Broader Impacts to both Dan and Andy as part of this for quite a while. And I think it's resonating. The idea of an Office of Broader Impacts would be that this is an office that helps you with your proposals. Most of us, when we write a proposal, we have to write a broader impact statement. And we do it. We try to do it. We go to K through 12 or whatever and do outreach. But most often these broader impact statements are not executed as well as they're promised, and they don't have longevity. And so an Office of Broader Impacts can help you identify ideas for your, for broader impacts for your research, can help you write the broader impact statement, can help you execute it once you get the grant, can help you assess it, and then ideally can make whatever it is you do long lasting. And so I'm totally on board with that one. That's going to be in the proposal for sure. But you're right, there's lots of universities that are doing this. When we first started this, it actually was a group of deans that Dan assigned to look at a couple different areas. And I was on the research one, and we all looked at strategic plans and grand challenge statements at other universities, and we were assigned to different universities. I was assigned to UC Davis, but I also looked at UCLA and UT Austin and a couple other places. So you're absolutely right. But at the same time, to be honest, I don't know that it's so important to be unique and nationally recognized for this. What I think is really important is that we figure out how to engage with our own community better and be more impactful, and also reward faculty and staff and students who engage in these kinds of things. We don't incentivize this very well. We care about academic analytics and publications and impact factor and those sorts of things, as opposed to rewarding community engagement. And I go back to the Urban Rangers project that I mentioned earlier. This is a really, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a really quiet little project. I'm trying to remember what's his name that does it. Jeff, can't remember Jeff's last name right now. But he got some funding from the BLM. And what it does, it funds students to go out into the mainly in the Jordan River district. And they basically walk along the river and pick up trash and look for things that are broken and fix it. But their real job is actually to identify homeless people, interact with them, make them feel human, talk to them, and find out if they need something. Do they need a blanket? Do they need food, etc.? And that's an incredible thing. It's a really small, creative thing. But if everybody was doing that, if everybody was engaged in that, it'd be incredible.
Hey, Darryl, I'm going to just jump in and really thank you. I know we're starting to lose people, and I just maybe as a parting shot, and really seriously to thank you. I didn't mean to rush through my appreciation for your time. But if there's people want to just reach out to you and how Nexus can promote what you're doing, I just want to make sure that we get kind of ideas communicated back to you. And if Nexus can help, harvest these ideas and help organize, just let us know. But if people just need to email you or go to this futures.utah website, I'm not sure what would be your kind of parting recommendation?
Well, you could certainly go to that site if you want to kind of highlight some of the things you're doing. I would recommend that, but feel free to call me or send me an email. I do prefer phone calls, believe it or not. I'm at the moment about 5,000 emails behind. Hopefully I'll catch up by Sunday. And I'm not actually joking about that. So I like talking to people, and happy to chat with you about what you do if you'd like it to be included in what I'm doing. And I really didn't touch on all the things that I'm doing, but I've got a large inventory of people, things we're doing, ideas for things that we could do, ideas for structural changes, etc. And I'll be putting all this together in a memo that I'll send to Dan Reed, hopefully next week sometime. So, but that doesn't mean it's the end of it. We're going to keep working on it and keep building it. And Nexus will be a major part of it.
Well, no excellent, Darryl. Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for your time and the great presentation. I'm sorry for the technical hiccup we experienced, but we persevered, just like the explorer on the surface of Mars. Perseverance. So, I thank everybody for joining us on this kind of gray Friday. And thanks again, Darryl. Appreciate it.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks.